Yeah, thank you, and again, a welcome from my side. Today, I'd like to talk a bit about the topic of transformation. So, if we could bring the slides up. I'd like to connect to what Mike said before. It's actually a pretty big honor to speak just after a NASA astronaut, and I would love to meet him in person and ask him if he could talk me through what all these buttons are for. Yeah? So if we look back into the Apollo cockpit in 1970, it looks pretty terrifying to actually understand what was going on there. If we look a couple of years later, that's Discovery, so it's much closer to what Mike actually was flying. There was actually a big transformation going on. We see all of the sudden screens, electronics in there, no longer those switches we had before. But what happened after it is truly fascinating. We look at SpaceX, the Dragon, we see all of a sudden touch screens are replacing the switches and the buttons we had before. So it's a truly fascinating transformation going on in space. And this is my theme for today, to think about transformations and how can they become successful. What we're actually seeing and hearing from analysis is that 70% of transformations are actually failing. And some of the reasons are not being prepared enough, haven't laid out enough what's going to happen. There's a lack of monitoring from this first idea to go out there and then execute it. And often it takes a lot of time to actually figure out constraints and issues when you're already in the middle of this transformation. But what's the alternative? Right now, we see a number of transformations going on in companies. It's not only migrating data centers into the cloud, it's rolling out global ERP systems. So there's big SAP, S/4HANA transformations going on right now, modernizing monolithic IT landscapes, as we heard this morning, shifting to microservices, merging business units or carving out business units, and changing whole operating models, for example, because of COVID-19. There is no alternative than better supporting transformations in the architecture and in the IT. For many years, LeanIX has been very much focused on the as-is of the IT landscape. So we've put all our focus to make that really, really good. When we started the business 8.5 years ago, we figured out that the tools were really not made good enough to reflect the as-is, so many companies were struggling. But today, I'd like to talk with you about a functionality we're bringing, which is called the Business Transformation Management, BTM. I'd like to explain it in an analogy. In software development, developers work collectively on code in different teams, but essentially they're putting changes to work all the time, as you see here. You call such a distributed software versioning system, for example, on GitHub and GitLab and others. You see all the changes coming in. And then you start to lay out changes to that architecture into the software code or to the architecture in different so-called branches. In our case, in the architecture, it could be migrating a finance system to the cloud. But it could be also a scenario where you buy an HR system or you build an HR system on your own, and you want to compare those two scenarios. We believe thinking about the future of architecture is actually no different than software developers work together on code and think about those different paths. So that's why we believe the modeling of those changes, which we call impacts, is very similar. But we're adding another thing to it. We are allowing to execute those changes on the architecture and also connect that with external systems. So for example, before you make such a change effective in your active architecture, it could be triggered by an outside process. So for example, by a completed project or task in Jira. But that's not all. It only gets powerful if you actually could use this and look into the future. Just as in a time machine, maybe some of you are familiar with how backups are done in Apple. So you can go to any point in time in your backup. What we are doing is we're doing this towards the opposite side of time. We're going into the future. So essentially, you cannot look on your application landscape as of today, but you can also switch into the future and see how the changes are actually affecting the landscape. So here you, for example, see we're taking out different applications, we're adding capabilities, we're modifying it. So that's a pretty powerful concept. I'm actually excited to say that we are launching this new BTM module soon. We have to work together with many of our customers in the couple of months before to actually figure out what the requirements are. So BTM will be a new module as part of our EA suite. We're going to make it available on September 30th. It will be an additional module. That means we're also introducing it into our scalable pricing model. So it can start as low as with 100 applications and can all the way up to your edition you have. We're going to have a deep dive session on all the functionality you saw in the video, like planning out the changes to the architecture, making sure the changes fit nicely after each other, executing the impacts in the active architecture. That's going to be with Johannes, who's going to do the deep dive session later today. But I'd like to show a video again on one of the customers who had access to the tool before. And this is an enterprise architect from the National Bank of Canada talking us through some of the value of the new BTM module.
Having business people and IT working together is way simpler using a tool like the BTM. I've successfully shown them that with the tool, there's a way to address all the interdependencies of initiatives regarding business capabilities. We can show facts now. Using the BTM, we can expose facts, and the BTM being delivered this fall, I think this will help us reach new heights.
I can't wait to see it live, being used in many of our workspaces, so I'm excited for this launch. For some of you, you might say, this is an additional module, but even if I don't have this module, can I get some of the benefits also for me? So that's why we've decided to add 2 of the improvements for everyone right away. The one is, as you're seeing here in our reports, we have added additional attributes to the application landscape. So you all remember that in the past, you can activate a heat map in our read modes, saying, I want to see the application landscape color-coded by the business criticality. Now you can add 2 more attributes as indicators for each application. That's very powerful to take decisions much quicker, seeing all those attributes on one view. The other addition we're adding is how you actually look at the application portfolio in time. In the past, it was necessary to actually set up the filters and then take a point in time you want to look at. What we're adding is a time slider, so you can easily now shift the application portfolio to a point in the future and see if new applications are going to be added or if some of them are going out of life. It's not taking the functionality of the changes, of the impacts. This is what Johannes will show later, but it is of great value to quickly show how your application landscape actually shows, and it makes the usability much easier. I would like to run you through a quick example and make it a bit more tangible and pick this topic of the cloud transformation and show you how this can look like step by step. But before that, why is that example so important? What we see looking at the big hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, they are growing very, very rapidly. This is a reflection that many companies are actually adopting the cloud even much faster. We see two topics where I believe that architects need to and have to deal with in the future. It is how to effectively do a cloud migration and then how to set up a cloud governance. Let me give you some more thought on that. So a question is often, how do you actually model the cloud migration strategies? And I borrowed here a great work which Amazon does by categorizing those changes during the migration into the 6 Rs. They are named rehost, replatform, repurchase, refactor, retire, and retain. So these are the different strategies how you can actually evaluate each and every application. It's very simple. You could say like rehosting is taking an existing application which is running in your own data center and just moving it into a virtual machine. It can be replatforming, where you adjust it a little bit and then run it into the cloud. And it can be different strategies like moving to a software as a service or completely rewrite it. So that is a big topic. How do you reflect that? How do you assess that? The second topic is, once you have everything of that in the cloud, what we hear are 3 big buckets of issues. The first is missing visibility. The second is uncontrolled cost and risk. And the third one is slow response times. And give you some examples. We are hearing that companies over and over discover now accounts like this quote. We discovered more than 120 AWS accounts we did not know about. And we actually didn't know who actually spun them up because someone took a credit card and just created them in the company. The other is that companies are running virtual machines leading to big amounts of money per month, which is actually not really used. And the other topic we're hearing is that it gets harder and harder to actually identify, in case of an issue or a bug, who is actually the owner of an AWS account, who has built the software which was deployed there. So these are all topics which require visibility, governance, and speed. We have thought through a 3-step approach for an end-to-end cloud transformation and governance, which we support with LeanIX. It starts with assessing the cloud readiness, planning and executing the migration, and establishing cloud governance afterwards. And the BTM module is actually now the glue between looking at the as-is application landscape in the beginning, assessing that, and the cloud intelligence module, which we had launched earlier in our EA Connect days last year. And I'd like to talk you through those 8 steps now to give you some more ideas how you actually can support this journey from an architecture perspective. The first step is actually building the inventory and collecting data in a survey. So it is important to understand what applications are all out there. What we've added to our functionalities are 3 big changes in our survey. We now allow you to add subscriptions in our survey capability. So assessing who's the application owner for a specific application was not there before. It now can be easily done. The next one is any kind of fact sheet field can now be easily included in such a survey. For example, the business criticality of an application, the technical fit. And also it's now possible to actually include tag groups. For example, to select one of those 6R migration strategies. You can immediately do that in one of the surveys as you see that here. This leads actually to an overview of all the migration strategies you have selected in your application portfolio. So we see that here, color-coded by the 6 R's, to get this overview, where are you going to do refactoring, rehosting, and so on. And this is where you now have the as-is view. You understand actually what you want to do. But this is where BTM now kicks in. Let's pick one of the examples, the rehost example here. Within such a transformation item, you can now decide that a specific application, in our case it's Law Plus, is going to change its hosting from on-premise with, in this case, HP, to Azure in the cloud. So we're removing the application hosting here with this change, what you see here, and we're adding the hosting on a virtual machine, on an Azure function, and by doing that, we're actually increasing the technical fit of this application. But this is not something which is actually immediately done to the architecture repository. It's just modeled out as a change which happens at a specific point in time. So it's now interesting to understand, how do all those changes actually fit together? What do you have to do first and second? What are the dependencies and also the risks? BTM now supports you in aligning those changes next to each other. So you see that here, we see a number of transformation projects grouped by business capabilities. It's much easier now to explain in what area what change is going to happen. So looking forward into the future. You can group those transformation items by business capability or by objective or by other areas. The next step is actually to see and describe how the future changes because of that. With our functionality of the so-called time machine, you can look into the future. When we take this application Law Plus, you see it somewhere on the left-hand side, when I switch the time scale into the future, we see that the technical fit of this application actually increases. Now, it's much easier to explain what is the impact of all your changes you're having. You can explain your business much easier that by the end of executing all those transformation steps, we have increased the functional fit, the technical fit, or the maturity of your business capabilities. So this can now all be reflected here. Now that we're in the cloud, all of a sudden, all those visibility and cost and risk issues kick in. So tracking the aggregated cloud KPIs on a dashboard is what you can do with our Cloud Intelligence Suite. You can look at the cloud services by provider, the costs per cloud service type, and most importantly, link together what the cloud services and resources in AWS Azure are to the business applications in the EA world. If you deploy and use cloud resources, they are like a zoo of unconnected things. The trick is now to extract information from the cloud provider platforms and correlate this data together so that you have a business understanding of why am I using so many virtual machines or Lambda functions, what are they used for? And what we also extract is security warnings and violations. And typical questions like, how many accounts are actually without a responsible, or which application do I not have an owner for? But cloud intelligence is not only a dashboard which can be used to identify problems. It's also a capability to go much deeper. So for example, on the level of an AWS Lambda function, which is one of the cloud services of those providers. You can go down on this level and understand what violations are out there. We are not only providing full insights into all the properties like the instance type or the technology lifecycle, which this cloud component actually has. We also relate it to tags and regions and all the information around it. We also map it to the technology business management framework, which has been introduced by Apptio before. So you can, with a click on a button, look on the entire framework of all your cloud services being used. And it aligns with the work Apptio and other companies in the TBM Council do. And it allows you to identify violations. In this case of the AWS Lambda function, we're using actually a technology which is no longer supported. And now you ask, okay, what am I going to do with that? We're going to take this data and then elevate it back into the enterprise architecture space. So here you see the application. In our case, it's called Gainsight. And we see a red dot on one of the technologies. What we're doing, we're taking all the cloud resource information and taking the violations so that you can understand it on an architecture level and that you can start taking architecture decisions. Where are we going to move that? And again, there is where the BTM again kicks in, that you can mitigate such risks. So we believe that an end-to-end data-driven cloud journey is really needed. And our EA suite is now supporting all steps of that. It is supported by data from traditional CMDBs like ServiceNow and other sources, and we augment it by the data which we're gathering using our cloud-native suite. That data can be used and is used by some of our customers to inform the traditional CMDBs too. So there are different options of using that, what we believe is a very powerful way to support a cloud transformation. I hope that I could make the use of our new BTM module a little bit more tangible in this transformation use case. But as promised, you will hear a bit more about this during this day. Let's spend a few more minutes on the platform and the strategy of LeanIX. As mentioned before, we're covering the full transformation cycle with our platform, with the 3 modules in the EA suite and the 2 modules in our cloud-native suite. And all those modules are supported by out-of-the-box integrations. You will see this afternoon also talks about Apptio and Lucidchart and Signavio. So we have a number of talks today, not only on BTM, the integrations, but also we had already some insight in our microservices topic. One of the things is, where is this going to go in the future? What's our strategy about it? We are going to become much more actionable with the help of that data in both areas of the product. So let's give you some examples. The Enterprise Architecture Suite will see more workflow support. So for example, for the approval of a new application, a functionality many customers have asked us for, or to better support the application rationalization workflow, where you are guided step by step, what are you going to do to rationalize an application? Or once you have identified the technology risk, that you replace the technology risk step by step. So these are example workflows, and the list goes on and can be even more flexible with your ideas. On the cloud-native side, we also apply the same idea. We want to help companies controlling their tagging strategy. Tagging is not the tags in LeanIX, it's what you use in AWS, Azure, to identify your cloud resources. We also will add cost thresholds and alerting to make you aware of what's happening in your cloud accounts and to identify issues and violations in open source, license usage, and vulnerability problems. So these are examples. We will have a dedicated session again later on today from our CTO, Jan, who will speak about our product roadmap in much more detail. There's one topic, though, I'd like to address out of our roadmap here, because we have heard it over and over again, and it's important for us to address and react to your feedback, which we value a lot. And it's in the bucket of what we call excellence in detail. It's a key topic for us. We keep hearing that we have issues in the report navigation, especially users and customers who have used LeanIX since many years have a certain usage pattern already. So that's why we thought hard again about our Smart Explore navigation concept, and we improved it. And I'd like to run a quick video for you so that you get a feel of the changes we're foreseeing there. So what you see here, if we're navigating into the reporting, we've changed to an overview of the reports first. So what you see is all the report types you actually can get. You can quickly filter them, for example, go into the landscape and see all the landscape reports. You can then narrow it actually down, for example, to applications. You can then jump in one of the reports and jump back from here straight to the overview which we're having. We kept the individualized reports, for example, looking at recently used reports to make it very easy to see them. What we added is another functionality to group them by use cases. We feel it's becoming more important to actually understand which of the reports actually help me to solve a specific topic, like technology risk, business transformation, or integration architecture. So these are all topics which we like to do in changing the reporting, and we value your feedback on this proposal, and we will have UX sessions throughout the day, but also during your regular EBRs. We would like to gather that feedback. And again, we will address and work on this topic in the next quarter. Another topic I'd like to point out in terms of our strategy and investment. A couple of weeks ago, we've launched our LeanIX Academy. I think it's a really great offering. You can go in there and train yourself and educate yourself, and in the end, get a certificate as an EA practitioner. That's what you can do online, and I've seen already customers doing it, sharing it, and we're getting feedback that it helps a lot to quickly onboard new users. What we're doing tomorrow is go to the next level. Level 2 is the Certified Enterprise Architecture Associate. That's a training we do here, a full day on-site, and also for the first time remotely. And we believe it's a part of an overall training strategy, which is primarily actually accessible in an online way and will have some components where you actually can get training support from us. And this is the overall picture, how it will look like, all the certifications we're thinking about. So in the category of enterprise architecture, we have actually now the first 2 certifications ready, and we will work next on the area of cloud native and on some of the deep dive topics. We get questions like, how do I support my enterprise architecture function in the scaled agile framework, which could be one of the deep dive topics here we want to put in one of the trainings. Before I come to the end of my speech, I would like to highlight one more area and a big need for transformation. When we put together the agenda for this conference, we struggled. We struggled a lot because we actually were only able to get to 4 people and speakers from minorities to represent actually here in this conference. So we see that it's actually in our world, in the architecture and IT world, it's not surprising that this is a man-dominated world, and we believe that we need to change this and get this out of there. So my question towards you is, we can do better as a company at LeanIX, but we need your help to identify great use cases and great inspirational topics which we can put on the agenda of such conferences. I believe we can make such a conference more diverse and have more interesting and challenging ideas by getting all those people together. And therefore, I'd like to move away from having this in a conference where we look on such a picture, but get to a higher diverse setup in the future. I wish you a lot of fun during the remainder of this conference, and please use the Slack channel and also, of course, the Twitter feed to inform yourself. That's all from my side. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.